So once again, you've reached the Spiritual Care Network webinar, The Verdict That Changed My Life by Sarah Bolton and Judge Bonnie Hellums. Thank you so much for speaking today and joining us with your inspiring story and video.
Thank you for having us. We're so happy to be here. So are we starting? Are we official now?
I think, yeah, we can go ahead and do that. Let me introduce, first of all, my friend Sarah. She's one of our leaders of the Spiritual Care Network, has led the central group. Well, that was previous to
COVID, yeah.
Until we had to stop all the face-to-face meetings. But she is quite a leader in the industry as a marketer, and also you're doing the art therapy now, right?
Yeah, so when COVID hit, I actually lost my business development job, and I kind of was like forced to pivot. But it's interesting because I've been wanting to focus more on my art forever, but was too afraid to do it. And when that choice was made for me, I really started pouring more time, more energy into it. And now I'm actually a mindful art facilitator. I run the mindful art program at the Orchard, and starting next week, I'll be running it at Positive Recovery Centers as well. So just a little a shameless plug. I have a few more slots available. I'm looking to facilitate at 3 more facilities. So if that's something you might be interested in, drop some info or question in the chat, and I'd love to talk with you about what that looks like.
I love to watch you as you're working on Instagram, how you video that. That's pretty cool.
The little time lapses, those are fun. Yeah, thank you.
Well, thanks again to everybody joining us. Please use the chat box to announce who you are, where you're from, where you work. We'd like to stay in touch. The audio and visual will be turned off today, but we have a Q&A box at the bottom. If you have questions for them, please use that Q&A box, and we'll do that at the end. So let me turn it over to you, Sarah, to maybe open us up with a word of prayer.
Yeah, of course. Heavenly Father, we are so grateful that you've provided this space and this platform for us to really come to know you better, and come to see your love and your grace and your mercy as it is shown through addiction recovery and mental health resources. We're just so grateful for all of the resources available to us across the state of Texas and the world. Father, I thank you for all of these facilities. I thank you for people who have struggled and overcome to help others. And Father, I thank you for the grace you extend to those who are still struggling. I thank you to the judges of the world who light fires under our tails to help us get on the right track. And Lord, just thank you for this platform and this ministry, the Spiritual Care Network, which shines light in a dark place. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Sarah. And I assume a few years ago, you would never have believed you'd be sitting next to Judge Bonnie.
No, no. She's in my kitchen right now, which is kind of crazy. So I have to introduce you all. Drinking water, man. Yeah. So this is Judge Bonnie Hellums, and in 2012, I started going through a custody suit with my ex-husband that was really just very ego-driven. And because of really the addiction that I was living in, we happened to end up in Bonnie's family court. But surprise, Bonnie is also an LCDC,
advanced addiction counselor,
Al-Anon, like had a husband who was an addict, so just immediately could spot that she was dealing with addicts, and yeah, and now we're friends, which is just crazy. If you have ever questioned if God has a sense of humor, our friendship is certainly proof that he has a huge sense of humor. So We have a video to show you actually about our story. Before I show the video, Bonnie, would you like to say anything about who you are?
I was a therapist and a university administrator before I became a judge. And having lived through addiction, both with my parents and with my first husband, my starter husband, I learned a lot, and learned that one of the things that the reason that God puts you in positions and times for you, if you don't learn from it, whatever you're living through, you are destined to have to learn it again at some other time. So best you take whatever you're being put through and find out, what is it, God, you want me to learn? And then turn around and share that lesson with other people when you can get them to listen. It was easier when I was a judge because they had to listen to me.
Yeah, so we laugh now, but it was no laughing matter. You'll hear in our video the kind of turning point, one of the turning points for me. And let's just say that when I got sober and started putting my resentment list together, this lady was on it. So with that, I think I'll just go ahead and show the video. Yeah, Eric?
Sounds great. It's a great video. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so I'm going to share screen.
Bear with us, everybody. It is, depending on your internet speed and the strength of your internet, it might get a little bit choppy, but that's okay.
So we are at the Harris County Courthouse, and 3 years ago it was here where my ex-husband and I fought for 5 very long and grueling days over custody of our 10-year-old son, Jack. Jack's father and I met on a Monday night in a bar. If that tells you anything about our backgrounds, it was our junior year of college. A couple of years later, I found out I'm expecting a baby, and here we are, 2 very young, wild, recently graduated college students that have this very adult thing thrown in their lap. We got married, and a year later, I decided to separate. It was just difficult for it to look like the Leave It to Beaver family, because we were both just so consumed with drugs and alcohol. Our custody agreement was 50-50. He actually remarried, and I asked him if he would consider revisiting our custody agreement. One thing led to another, and the next thing I knew, we were just in a full-fledged war.
This was my courtroom in my home for the last 7 or 8 years, and it was a brand I'm Bonnie Hellums. I was the judge of the 247th District Court. It was a family court, and I did it for 20 years. Sarah and Doug's case had gone on for a while, and I saw them a couple of times. And I don't remember exactly what it was, but there was some squirreliness going on. And I have been an alcohol and drug counselor as well. So I pick up on cues a little more quickly.
On the day that I thought would be the last day of the trial, when I thought the ruling would be in my favor, I was in for a huge shock when the judge asked me to leave the witness stand. She just sat up tall, and she pointed her finger at us, and she said, "I think that you both have a substance abuse problem, and I have the right mind to take this child away from you both." That's the stuff that nightmares are made of.
I cold busted them, and I warned them. I said, "Guys, don't push me on this. If you don't get clean and sober, I will take this little boy and give him to someone who will put him first."
In that courtroom, we both were forced to face the fact that we had issues with substance abuse. One night, I know that I consumed close to 3.5 bottles of wine, and I was standing at the refrigerator that next morning, so hungover, and I heard a voice. Plain as day, I heard a voice that told me, "You will die if you keep drinking like this." I knew that if I continued, my life was going to end. After I got sober, I knew that I needed to have a church family. So I started going to St. Luke's in July of 2014, and then I started to hear what the story was about. And when I heard that it was a church that was for non-religious people, I thought, okay, like that sounds like a pretty cool concept. Let me check it out. And just immediately knew, like, this is it. This is absolutely where I belong. And my faith just began to grow by leaps and bounds. One Sunday morning, I was greeting people at the front door, and this woman walks in. She looked so familiar, but I couldn't quite put my finger on who she was. And I'm just staring at her, and all of a sudden, it dawns on me.
St. Luke's had been my church for 56, 57 years. First time that we were going to the story, we walked up and Sarah looked at me and said, "Are you Judge Hellums?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "You don't remember me, do you?" And I looked at her and I said, "No, sweetie, I don't."
I'm just shaking. I was so nervous because this woman was so incredibly intimidating to me, but I just knew I had to tell her. And I said, "Listen, you tried my custody case about a year ago, and I just wanted to let you know that because of the things that you said to me in that courtroom, I've been sober for almost a year." And she grabbed me and hugged me so tight. Her eyes filled up with tears. And she just said, "Thank you, thank you, thank you."
I just was so tickled and so moved because you never know if the decision you made was right.
It's moments like that where you just know that God is so real. God is at the center of my life today, and I owe a lot of my spiritual growth to the story. Are you gonna go with a spooky pumpkin or like a classic pumpkin? You want me to hold it? When I got sober, I was fortunately able to take my last drink and not have another one since. Doug's road to recovery has been a little different.
When we had our Bible study one Sunday night, Sarah had come and said, "Please pray for Doug because he's on Kush and I'm afraid he's going to die." And she said, "I'm scared to death to let Jack go with him because he's not sober."
It wasn't a battle. You know, I didn't try to take him back to court. I didn't berate him. I prayed for him really, really hard. This year on my birthday, he showed up at my back door with a bunch of flowers, and he said, "Happy birthday, I'm getting sober."
I'm a real stubborn, hard-headed individual. Thank God everybody was praying for me. I just never really thought this would be my lifestyle. Even when I got into recovery the first time, I thought it was more about just getting fixed so I could go drink like a normal person or use drugs like normal people do. I didn't realize it was like changes the way you think, you know? You almost really become a different person. Today we have a really great relationship. We truly co-parent Jack, and it's literally 50-50. I believe that God has a really huge sense of humor, and this story is a testament to that. Hi.
I'm so excited to see you.
Excited to see you too.
How does it feel?
Well, I gotta tell you, being up here this time, I feel really different than the last time I was up here. And I feel differently about you.
Yeah.
You know, my opinion of you used to be, I would describe you as a Judge Judy. A mean old Judge Judy.
You're probably not the first person who said that. God moves in incredibly wonderful ways, and He gifts you with things that you would never have even known to ask for. Now I can love her like I would like to have come down off the bench and loved her. But I couldn't. I had to play my role, because if I hadn't, neither one of them would have realized the importance of their sobriety on their child. We did it.
We did it. Yeah.
I feel like your mother.
I know, you do. You give good motherly hugs. I love your hugs.
Oh, man. Oh.
right. So there is kind of really the starting point of our story. That video was filmed 4 years ago. For those of you who know me, Jack is now 14 and way taller than me. Oh, hold on. Well, hold on, we have a technical difficulty here. Okay, now we're back. All right.
That makes me feel better. I'm not the only one that has.
Yeah. So as you saw in the video, Bonnie was my judge, and I was not the biggest fan of hers. It was one of the darkest moments of my life, thinking that my child might possibly be taken away from me because of, at the time, I just thought it was a choice. I really didn't understand the disease of addiction, and thankfully now I do. And so, you know, I'm going about my life. I'm living a life in recovery. I'm living a life for the Lord, and I get really involved in this church. And it was a brand new church plant, and I got involved from the ground up. So I was handing out, you know, church bulletins one morning, and I see Bonnie in the lobby, and I mean, immediately, I think I felt like a volt of electricity go through my entire body. What you need to know, I mean, we are family today, but like, this woman was the most intimidating woman probably ever in the world to me. And so it literally felt like God took over my body. And I can remember almost having like this out of body experience as I walked towards her. Like, I would have never been bold enough to go up to her. It was literally like a spiritual experience, just telling her who I was. And for her response to be to grab me, hug me, and weep. I mean, literally, it was just so incredibly moving, and that launched a friendship / family relationship that we have today. And you know, it's because of God and because of recovery. So
it was in my husband and I have been going to that church for the whole 30 years we've been married, and I was married there both times, had my kids baptized there, and we were walking down the hall, and my husband said, I understand there's a new preacher here, and you want to stop and hear him? I hear he's pretty good. And I said, sure. We had done church and Sunday school, and so we thought, well, we'll just stop. Well, here she is with the programs handing out, and her eyes get real big, and she goes, are you Judge Hellums? And I said, yeah. And she said, may I speak to you alone? Well, my husband, as you could see from the picture, is very large. He played pro football for the Oilers. And he said, sure, you can talk to both of us. Part of the problem had been that being a family court judge, 50% of the time you hack off the other 50%. So my house had been broken into, people had destroyed my car. I had been threatened, life-threatening stuff. It was pretty scary. Had a bailiff with me a lot of the time. And at the end of 14, I had retired. So this was in 15, and I had already retired. So see, because judges can't talk to people outside the court setting if the people are still in front of them. That's called ex parte communication. And so I couldn't have talked to her, and we couldn't have started the relationship if I hadn't already retired. So her case was no longer it was still in my court, but I wasn't the judge to hear any more of it. So when she asked if that was me, we walked around the corner and talked to her. And I think by that time, didn't you have your chip?
Not yet. I was close to a year. Close to a year. Okay. But when we filmed the video, I had my 2-year chip, and I gave you one of my 2-year
exactly
chips. Yeah,
exactly. And it was just incredible, because in truth, for the 20 years that I was on the bench and the decisions that I made, very rarely did I find out from anybody whether I made the right decision or not. And in 2004, I started a family drug court, because I was very well aware she was not in my drug court. This was just an ordinary case. But I started a family drug court because I understood the importance of so many of the divorces and family problems we've got are because of substance abuse. And then you combine that with a mental health problem. You have a co-occurring mental disorder. And so that got started. And then I started realizing that some of the mothers and fathers, when I would tell them there were certain things that they had to do in their recovery, they weren't capable of doing it. And then I would find out that their mothers had used alcohol and drugs when they were pregnant with them. And now they're adults that cannot follow through because they have had FASD, the fetal alcohol spectrum disorder that came from the mother using. So we put in a portion to the drug court that was for infants and toddlers. And so it was the family intervention court and the infants and toddlers court, because if you can get those kids that have FASD and work with them, early childhood intervention, you can maximize their capacity to grow and learn and handle things. So anyway, that's just kind of a piece of where the drugs and alcohol and stuff, but this was just out of the blue. This was just an ordinary run-of-the-mill regular case of them fighting. And I can remember she said, "You sat up in that big old black chair and picked up that phone and said, I want these people drug tested." She said, "Whoa." And then I called them up and I said, "Okay, tell me, who's going to be honest with me?" "Oh, me. Neither one of us. Are you kidding me?" Well, needless to say, I cold busted both of them. So but it's made, and both of them today are clean and sober and really are co-parenting this child. And Jack is so lucky, because they're both really wonderful people. And it's just a question of that substance abuse can turn people who are wonderful into folks who aren't thinking straight. So are you going to tell the story about your first time when we came to watch the video and stuff, or not? When you asked me and Carol to come up and sit and watch you do your first talk to the AA group.
Oh, yeah. So, our story, it's continuing to develop big time. I mean, like I mentioned, the video that you just saw was really a launching point for our relationship. But then I've been invited to tell my story in various capacities. And so there was a Celebrate Recovery who they'd seen me present at a conference. The chapel would Celebrate Recovery. And so they said, "Hey, would you come and tell your story at our church?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to do that." And so I invited Bonnie and I invited my sponsor and some girlfriends, and had a lot of just really beautiful support. And so I was supposed to just be telling my story, but it kind of turned into like this mini sermon. And at the end of the service, Bonnie comes up to me and she's like, "You're going to be a preacher one day." And I was like, "Bonnie, I am not."
All right, I'm going to clean up the story. I went up and said, "Okay, what's my number one rule?" Number one rule is that the biggest sin in the world is being given a gift by God that you don't use to help other people. And I said to her, "You have a gift." And she said, "What do you mean I have I said, "You've got a gift of preaching." I mean, the talk she gave, Bible verses without, it was fabulous. She did give a sermon. And I said, "You need to think about becoming a minister and preaching." And she said, "Oh, well, I do Christian yoga." And I said, "That's not what I mean, squirrel. You need to consider going into the ministry because you're that good at it." And so she's dipping her toes into that as well.
Dipping my toes in that, which is cray. So I'm in the process of becoming a Methodist deacon. That's an ordained position. Currently, I'm a certified candidate, and the next step for me will be entering seminary. It's still, I don't know exactly when yet. I'm kind of looking at fall of 2021. So that son of ours, he is likely following in mom and dad's footsteps. We've been, oh, thank you. So my son, he started dabbling in drugs and alcohol. And, you know, his father and I, we understand that this disease, it's sort of two-pronged, right? So there's the hereditary part. You know, he is more than likely genetically predispositioned to have the disease. But there's also a social side of it as well. And, you know, we live in inner city Houston, and I mean, quite frankly, I think he was just kind of running with a crowd of kids where they were experimenting, and in his mind, everyone was doing it. And so we were like, if you're not going to stop hanging with these kids, we're going to remove you from these kids. And so we just put him in Marine Military Academy. He started this year. It's the start of his 9th grade year, which was, just the hardest thing I've ever done as a parent, for sure. Overnight, I kind of became an empty nester. I wasn't thinking that was coming for another 4 years, but we have committed to doing everything we can to curtailing this disease taking hold in our son's life. And when you look at the statistics, I believe 95% of all addicts begin using under the age of 18. And so while he's experimented a little bit, you know, that his brain is still developing, that prefrontal cortex, which gets hijacked by the disease of addiction, is still developing. And if we can keep him clean and sober, even until 18, 21, 25, that really, really increases his chances of not having to live with it like we did. So that was a very long-winded way to tell you that right now I'm essentially putting a kid through college. So probably can't put myself through right now. But, you know, one thing that I know about God is that he provides. I mean, his provision is like, so I have no doubt that opportunity will present itself, like a scholarship will present itself. There's already some things kind of in the works, and I've been talking with both Perkins and Asbury seminaries. So it's happening. It's just kind of a matter of when. But yeah, it's crazy how, you know, yet again, all of this started from the thing that was tearing my life apart, which was the addiction to alcohol, and also co-occurring disorders. I have a co-occurring eating disorder, and also have struggled with depression and anxiety, really, I think my whole life, but it was masked by the drinking. I had my first drink at 11, and the first time I used drugs was at 13. So I really never gave myself an opportunity to feel, because as soon as I could really start feeling things, I began masking it with drugs and alcohol, and probably with boyfriends too, if we're just being completely forthcoming here. And so a couple of years into my sobriety, that's when I really started to kind of be faced with the mental health issues that I also struggle with. So, you know, it's just, it's really one day at a time. That applies to all of this. But to take these experiences that were traumatic and wrecking my life, for those very experiences to now be the thing that had given birth to my complete livelihood, but really not just mine, like the livelihood of so many other people, you know, giving my son the opportunity to be in a place where he's safe and secure. The opportunity to even just coming to talk here today, how cool. Like, I have no idea who's going to hear this, and we really do want to open it up and make this kind of like interactive. So like, if you have any questions for either a woman in recovery or for a judge, you have got a judge here.
It's almost Halloween.
It is spooky season. She's clearly an open book, in case you can't tell. And so, you know, we would love for you to take this time to like ask your questions. It can be as, you know, bold as you'd like, and we'd be happy to answer those. So, Eric, are there any comments yet, or has anyone put a question or a comment in the chat box?
No, I encourage everybody to please use the Q&A box, but I want to know a little bit more about your art therapy and how that's helping, and how that has.
Oh, yeah. But that's pretty cool too. So you know that Christian yoga that Bonnie was picking on me about, that is a real life ministry. So I'm also a certified Revelation Wellness Fitness instructor, and RevWell is basically just, it uses fitness as a tool to share the gospel. And when I became a Christian, which was around the same time that I got sober, really, back in 2014, I heard about this ministry and thought that it sounded like a really cool thing. I had a coffee with my pastor one morning and she was like, yes, we need this at our church. So I was like, okay, cool. Like, I'll go through the training and become a RevWell fitness instructor. And it was pretty intensive. And it was the first time that I'd ever done anything this bold for the Lord. Like, I mean, it was a 2-month-long commitment, and the training, we had weekly Zooms, which is interesting because that was before Zoom was like a thing. That's how we learned. We had Zoom, and then we had a week-long intensive in Williams, Arizona, just outside of the Grand Canyon, and it was amazing. And so while I was there at the retreat, we'll get to that in a second. While I was there at the retreat, for this fitness and faith thing that I was doing, our small group leader challenged us to get with God on 2 things. 1, what are the things that you believe about yourself that are lies and God wants you to know are not true? And 2, what are the things that when God looks down on you, he smiles? And I just remember thinking, like, how in the world am I going to like, is God just going to present these things to me? Like, I don't even know how this works. You know, I was still a pretty new believer then, but I had faith, you know, and scripture says, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, like, and ask this mountain to move, and God will move mountains. And so I prayed and prayed and prayed. And it was like the 3rd day, this one morning, I had this just sort of spiritual experience where I knew God was going to reveal to me those things. And so I'm journaling and I'm overlooking the mountains and I've got my coffee, and it's just this very just beautiful moment that I know that God curated exactly for me, exactly for that moment. And what God revealed really shocked me. One of his things was, I smile when you create art. And I thought, this is very, very odd, because what does art have to do with fitness? What does art have to do with faith? And I was still too immature in my faith to realize, well, kind of everything. I mean, God is the creator. Like, he's the ultimate capital C creator. And when I was a little girl, I always wanted to be an artist. I started college as an art major and thought, this is stupid and I'll never make any money doing it. And so I'm just gonna give it up. And, you know, college was really when my addiction took root in my life, and all of the creative things that I did really were hijacked by my addiction. And so after getting sober and coming to know the Lord, having this spiritual experience, it was crazy. Like a month later, I am on this trip with my church, and I'm doodling in a journal, and the family behind me see my doodles, and they're like, oh, I love the way you write that. Could we commission you to do a scripture piece for us? And I was like, commission? Like, what? But from that, I started doing scriptural pieces. I started doing modern calligraphy. So as sort of like my side hustle, when I was doing business development, I was painting Bibles. I was doing some fine art, doing modern calligraphy of prayers and wedding vows and all kinds of different things. And so when COVID hit, I had been with a treatment center for almost 3 years in business development, and they had to let a big chunk of the business development team go due to COVID. And I was just like, holy cow, like, what am I going to do? I'm a single mom, like, I'm the sole provider for my family. How am I going to make ends meet? And I thought, okay, like, this art, it's been your side hustle. Maybe it needs to be your main hustle. And so I started just really doing and creating more art, but then actually got trained as a facilitator for something called mindful art. And it's a trauma-informed means of facilitating art that is more focused on the process rather than the final product. And it basically makes art accessible to anybody. Like, you really don't have to have an artistic bone in your body to create things that really kind of pull some feelings out of you. It's magical to watch experience. And so I started facilitating that program out at the Orchard on the Brazos, which is a new treatment center that just opened its doors July 1st. And then as of next Tuesday, I'll also facilitate this program at Positive Recovery Centers here in Houston. So it's just, when I think back to how God has just constantly been guiding me and advising me, and thankfully, I'm not always so hard-headed that I don't listen. It's just like incredible. Yeah.
One thing about what you've just talked about that people don't really realize, my philosophy is that everything you learn how to do, art, mindfulness, whatever it is you do, that is a flower in your bouquet. And the bouquet changes, and you can look at it from different directions. Oh, I mean, now who in the world would have thought that the art and preaching and the business angle of it and everything else, every time you look at her bouquet, you can look at it from different angles, and there's so many things that she can tie these things together. That's what, my two majors in college were psychology and religion. Now, what's that going to get you? You know, I was going to be a high school counselor, and they told me, sorry, you have to have 2 teaching fields, and so go back and get another bachelor's. And I said, oh, heck no. So I went to graduate school instead and got a master's in counseling and guidance, higher education administration, and rehab counseling, working with quadra and paraplegics. Now, how in the world does that end up being a judge? I mean, God's going to take you where you are, and is going to look at your bouquet in a different way. So the kinds of training, you've got to get training from life as well, and make sure that you realize that's another flower that you've got in your bouquet. And you don't ever put down anything you've learned. You just figure out some way to translate it in the new world you're in.
Judge, I could tell you have a lot of wisdom. Do you have any desire to get back into counseling?
Oh, yeah, I do. I mean, I do a lot of counseling now, a lot. I was up till almost 1 o'clock in the morning talking to a kid in college up in Boston who was having problems. So, I mean, yeah, I do it. I do a lot of it.
She counsels me.
Awesome.
Not officially,
And
though.
she listens.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. I love the bouquet analogy too, because in fact, the last time 2 times ago that I saw Bonnie, we met for lunch, and I was just so freaked out about, I just put my son in this school, and I'm like, the math doesn't add up, and I'm going to be homeless. Like, how is this going to work? She's like, no, honey, you have your bouquet, and you need to be looking at your bouquet. And she's right. I mean, it's working out.
Another piece to this, she and her ex, the daddy of her son, the 2 of them, clean and sober, had a wonderful picture of them with their son in the car driving down to a new drug and alcohol free existence for him.
Yeah.
And so many times parents don't realize that this is a family disease, and these kids are going to be, and that's why you really need to sit down and talk to them and say, look, you've got 1 or 2 addictive parents, and the chances of you becoming an addict, if you ever start messing around with this stuff, is off the roofs. Don't go there. But they're not going to listen a lot of times. You've got to be ready to move and do what's the next right thing.
Yeah. So
we do have a couple questions if you're ready.
Yeah, let's hear them.
Okay. Jack is asking, how have verdicts progressed in terms of creative sentencing among your peers? That's the question for the judge.
I have a coffee mug that states, it ain't my circus, it ain't my monkeys. When I retired, things kind of went south in some of the areas, and I was just a basket case. How can they do this? What do they do? Why aren't they? And I have to realize that it's not the same courts that I left. We have brand new judges. All the judges were wiped out in the election in 18. They're all brand new judges there. And I've got to tell you, having been a new judge at one point, I remember calling a friend of mine who was one of the leading family law attorneys in the city that had been a mentor to me. And I said, Berta, I was a lawyer today. Tomorrow I'm a judge. And I don't know one whit more now than I did then. And she said, it's us as attorneys that need to educate you. So she said, let us give you the law and teach you what we need to know. It's very hard when you've been elected and suddenly you're in that robe to sit up there and be able to say, I don't know what I'm doing. You've got to pretend like you do. And so there's a lot of fast learning curve that's going on with a bunch of family law cases. As far as, we don't sentence people I was in family court. So that was under a different code than the criminal stuff. Although we did handle, or I particularly handled a lot of addiction cases. And sometimes the sentencing was that you don't get to keep your kid because you're not willing to do the work to get clean and sober to provide a healthy living environment for your kids. So I'm not sure where their sentencing stuff is these days because I really don't know these new judges that were just brought in.
Bonnie, could you maybe speak to specialty courts? Because I feel like specialty courts do offer some creative ways to sentence. I guess it's not sentencing because they're still kind of on probation.
Dealing with the cases.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I'm heavily involved with right now, my husband and I both are, is in fighting sex trafficking. And what lots of times is happening is that these girls that have been sex trafficked are arrested as prostitutes. And they are developing a specialty court that is going to deal with sex trafficking issues, which will deal with the trauma involved and all the other stuff that goes with having been trafficked, to help them be dealing with them from a therapeutic standpoint rather than from a criminal prostitution, let's lock them up kind of attitude. But the family court and the juvenile courts, and there's a lot of ability with specialty courts to do things that the ordinary courts don't do.
That's great. And Andre wants you to run for governor. I see that chat.
Me or Marcel?
Oh, heck no. Look, I have way too much of a past to ever run for governor, so you must be talking about this later.
I got to tell you, though, when I was on the bench, one of the things, and I'm sure I gave the speech to them, but one of the things that I talked about when I would have divorces is in trying to explain to people about dealing with their children and how they needed to find something bigger than themselves. And I didn't care whether it was a mosque or a synagogue or a church, but they needed to find something bigger than themselves so they weren't, it wasn't so much, hey, it's all about me kind of stuff, because then the kids end up following after. And if you've got an addictive parent, so many times the kid says, well, I have not had dad in my life, so by God, I'm going to go out and use drugs just like he did, and then we're going to have something in common. No, that works real well. And if the parent is still using, it does sometimes work because they do end up using together. But now, when you have two clean and sober and healthy parents like Jack has, it's a blessing.
Awesome. And back to Sarah's story, Jennifer is asking, what has helped you the most in your recovery? Individual and or group counseling, 12 steps, church, sponsor?
Yeah, all of the above. So when I first got sober, I definitely needed 90 meetings in 90 days. I just did. You have to think about, for 20 years of my life, the majority of my life, I had turned to substances to change the way that I felt. And so you really have to retrain your brain. New neural pathways have to be created. And it's interesting because I don't know when the 90 and 90 started, when that became like kind of a thing that just advised of you to do 90 meetings, 90 days. But interestingly, it takes about 3 months for new neural pathways to develop or be formed in the brain. And so I did a ton of meetings. I got a sponsor right away, and I did everything that she said. I was ready. I was really ready. I didn't want to live a life in addiction anymore. And once I was faced with it, you know, I did step one. So step one is admitted we were powerless over alcohol and our lives have become unmanageable. For sure I was powerless because I had this judge who's like, I'm going to take your child away, but I continued drinking. You know, it wasn't till kind of the end of the trial when I actually had a spiritual experience, actually standing at this fridge right here. and I heard the voice of God tell me, you will die if you keep drinking. I was 31 years old. I had an 8-year-old son, and I did not want to leave him motherless. And literally the next day I went to my first AA meeting that had never been like court mandated or my attorney recommended it. I just decided, okay, this is it. Like, I've got to make a change. So God was a tremendous part of my recovery. And interestingly, as far as becoming a Christian, I think that God uses creative ways to reach us. So when I started going to church, this was my mindset. Growing up in Arkansas, okay, Bible Belt to the max, I never felt like church was the place for me because I had done too many horrible things. I had no beef with God, but I was just like, well, I must have missed the boat on that. I've done too many horrible things to be loved by God, and so I'm just not going to have that relationship. But in my mind, all the church people were also good people. And so I was like, okay, so I'm going to get sober and I'm going to get involved in a church, because if church people are good people and I want to be a good person, well, I guess I need to be all friends with church people now. And that's how I even started going to St. Luke's. Like, it was so for the wrong reasons, but like God knew, right? Like God knew what was going to speak to me. And I will never forget, y'all, the first church retreat I went on, everybody was drinking. I was like, what? But not alcoholically, obviously. They had a couple beers and stopped, which is mind-boggling to me as a woman in recovery. So yes, it's recovery meetings or a program of recovery. Yes, it's a relationship with God. And then a third component that's been really huge is having a community. So for me, it looks like a recovery community. It looks like a believer community. I have women in my life who just, oh my gosh, like I have been through really some of the hardest times of my life I've been through while sober. My sobriety date June 24th of 2014. And I've experienced some of the hardest times of my life since getting sober. And I've been able to maintain my sobriety through those difficult times with kind of that trifecta that I just, was talking about. The recovery, God, well, really God, then the recovery, and then also just having this community of support around me that I'm just really grateful for.
Awesome. And I just posted the title of our next webinar is going to be Modern Day Medicine Has Made the Spiritual Foundation of 12-Step Recovery Obsolete, Fact or Fiction, by Dr. Boone. So I put the link in there, and I think he's going to agree with you that it takes everything. But let's see what he says. So if anybody wants to register, the link's on the chat. I've had a few people ask if they can get your contact information. So if you wouldn't mind putting that in the chat. And also, I know you're studying for the ministry. I wanted to throw out another thing that we're doing with the Spiritual Care Network on October 29th at 10 a.m. We are offering a forum for ministry leaders, spiritual leaders, to come together to discuss like mental health concerns within the church leader roles. And I know a lot of times as church leaders, ministers, pastors, you're expected to be perfect, and we're not perfect people. And so if you would like to join that forum, it's going to be not a webinar, but more a web meeting forum where you could see everybody and discuss that topic. Please register. The email was sent out earlier too. So.
Yeah.
Great. Sarah just posted her information. Thank you, Sarah.
The yoga fitness program. I can see the comments now. Cool. Okay. So it's called Revelation Wellness. You can Google it. The website is revelationwellness.org. And it is, like I said, it's a program that uses fitness as a tool to share the gospel. It also is sort of based on the principle that our bodies are a temple of the Holy Spirit. And I think the enemy definitely uses having the perfect body as a distraction. And so it kind of changes your relationship with your body too. It's about way more than just the fitness, for sure. They have a podcast, they have online stuff that they're doing. I mean, all kinds of things. Also, I'll drop some info in the chat. There's so St. Luke's Church, which is the parent church to the story, is hosting a women's conference all throughout the month of October. It's going to be this virtual women's conference. And so on Saturday, October 12th, I will be doing a virtual RevWell fitness workout through that conference. And then on that following Saturday, I don't know what the date is off the top of my head, but I'll be doing a virtual experiential art. It's called Creating with Our Creator, and we'll be experimenting with acrylic pouring. So I'll drop some info in the chat for that too, if you have any interest in signing up for that women's conference.
Sounds cool. Judge, do you have any good advice for us mental health professionals out there and how to work with the courts or with the changing world of the webinar, telehealth and all that kind of stuff?
Well, the courts are mostly meeting on Zoom still. They have not opened up the courthouse. And I think probably, I don't know that this is fair, but I don't know any other judge that had mental health training like I do. So I think that if you guys could maybe talk to the Texas Center for the Judiciary and perhaps put together a program. They have a conference for judges, and it would be really good for them to get some understanding. And as far as I'm concerned, trauma is number one. I don't think judges understand trauma at all. And there are just so many times that things that we do, well, we'll just take the kid away then and we'll do thus and so, without there being any understanding of the trauma that it is for removing a child from a home. And yet if the parents are, I have a new gig. The governor, Abbott, appointed me to be the chair of the the Department of Family and Protective Services Advisory Council for the state of Texas. So I'm trying to help revamp CPS. So that's why my hair used to be dark. And I've now snatched out big sections of it, but it's interesting. And we have a new commissioner for CPS who is wonderful, a young woman named Jamie Masters, who is great. But there's a lot of changes that are taking place. And I am truly a retirement failure. So, oh well.
Let us know if we can help with that project. I guess you'll be done by next Friday, right? Revising
Yeah.
CPS. Okay. Well, great. Any last questions? Please post those. You had a lot of great comments. How inspirational your story was.
Yeah, Bob, Judge is hilarious. And actually, I wish you had worn one of your t-shirts.
Oh.
He has the most inappropriately hilarious t-shirt that she likes to wear.
I had one on yesterday that said, "In my defense, I was left unsupervised."
Yeah, she's got jokes, this one.
She didn't know that at the time she was in front of me, but that's all right.
Scared. She was Judge Judy, like I said, she was like meaner than Judge Judy, really. She was.
But seriously, on Halloween, I would come out with the black robe on, and I had a big old witch's hat, and I would carry a broom, and the door would I would just barely open the door and make sure they were ready for me, and then I'd throw the door open, and I'd come running out and go, and I mean, people were wetting their pants, and I just don't know that for sure, but anyway, it was really funny.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Any other crazy stories about the courtroom?
No, probably get in trouble for what I've already said.
Never stopped you.
That's true.
Well, great.
Yeah,
Well,
so I think I probably maybe just would like to wrap up by saying that kind of with some hope, actually. You know, statistically, 1 in 5 people struggle with a mental illness of some sort, and 1 in 7 will struggle at some point with addiction to substances. And so, you know, right now I see there's 44 people on. Chances are there's someone who either is struggling with one of those 2 things, or someone very close to you that you love is struggling with those 2 things. I just want to say that it is certainly overwhelming, and I never want to like discredit some of the feelings that you can have around those things, but there is hope. Absolutely, there's hope. There are so many resources, and you know, Bonnie and I both shared our email addresses. Really, I think both of us, our heart and our mission is to provide resources, and just, you know, like the whole mission of the Spiritual Care Network, it's to bridge that gap. We want to do that, and so please save our information, and we would love to help point you in the right direction, because we've both been there. You know, we've been there as addicts, as family members, and so we can really relate and understand what that is like. And you know, we'd like to believe, I think, that we come across as safe people that, you know, you can openly share with. And so
one of the things too I would encourage is to understand that it was a big deal when Jesus died, and we are forgiven because of it. And that's why there is hope for anybody we know. For them, if they've got to want it as much as you want it for them, you can't do it for them, but you can help them understand that there's somebody that has already paved the way for forgiveness. It's already out there just waiting for you to pick it up.
amen.
Amen.
Thank you for saying that. Well, great. Thanks again to both of you for joining us today and sharing your story and a lot of wisdom. There's been a lot of wisdom on our webinar today, and we really appreciate your support for the Spiritual Care Network. And thanks for everybody for joining us. You know, it's kind of cool. The quarantine, I feel like people are getting tired of sitting at home and working at home. And so in Houston, we're actually going to do 2 face-to-face networking meetings through the Spiritual Care Network. Next Tuesday, we have a group getting together at the Heights Hospital in the basement. So come join us if you feel daring, and masks are required. In fact, they're not only required, we're going to have a mask decorated contest. So decorated masks can look really cool. We have raffle prizes and good food sponsored by the Birdwell Foundation. And then a week after that in Katy, we're going to have another face-to-face networking event in the parking lot outside in David Martin's Counseling Center. So the emails are going out. If you're in the Austin area, we're going to do one at the end of the month at the Timothy Center. So we're slowly getting out of our holes and coming out and networking. So thanks again for joining us today. And that concludes our webinar. Please join us next time. Take care. Thank you.